Then we move on to specification number 5, which asks us to outline the process of pollination and distinguish between self-pollination and cross-pollination. Now, plants can carry out pollination in two ways: they can self-pollinate, or they can cross-pollinate. The process of pollination is quite simple. First, pollen grains are produced in the anthers, and these pollen grains contain the male gametes. When the pollen is mature, the anthers split open and release the pollen. Next, the pollen is transferred to the stigma. This transfer can occur through agents such as insects like bees or through the wind. When a pollen grain lands on a suitable stigma, it begins the next stage of the process. The pollen grain then grows a tiny tube down the style toward the ovary. Through this pollen tube, the male gamete travels to the ovule. Fertilization occurs when the male gamete fuses with the female gamete inside the ovule. After fertilization, the ovule develops into a seed, and the ovary develops into a fruit. So, self-pollination can be defined as the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same flower, or to another flower on the same plant. In this process, the pollen does not need to travel to a different plant. Self-pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same flower or to another flower on the same plant. It may occur when pollen falls directly onto the stigma or when insects carry pollen within the same plant. After pollination, the pollen grain grows a pollen tube down the style so the male cell can reach and fertilize the female egg cell inside the ovule. One advantage of self-pollination is that it does not depend on pollinators and can still occur when insects are scarce, which helps prevent extinction in isolated plants. However, a disadvantage is that it produces very little genetic variation, making future generations less adaptable to environmental changes.